Hi folks, today I'm at the Museum of Alaska Transportation Industry located just north of Wasilla, Alaska, and we're going to take a look at some vintage Alaska Railroad trains that are here on the museum grounds. What we're looking at right here is the 1500, and it was the first and last F7A on the Alaska Railroad. It was built and acquired in 1952, and it was retired in 1985. And it was donated to the museum about 1986. So we're going to walk through and I'm going to show you some of the equipment that's here. And here's another locomotive right here. This is the 1000. It is an Alco Rs1 locomotive, and it was built in 1944. And it was primarily used at first from Portage to Whittier during World War II. There was also another RS1, the 1001. They were used instead of steam locomotives to go through the long tunnels. One is now the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel that you drive through when you go to Whittier. So we're going to walk through now, and I'm going to show you some of this train stuff that's here. Here's a good side shot here of the 1500. This is the same locomotive that was in the movie Runaway Train with John Voight. I believe that was filmed, 1984, came out in 1985, so it was filmed right before the 1500 was retired. 1000 was retired in 1973. In some of its last years of service, it was a yard switcher in Anchorage. And some of you Alco fans out there, alcoholics, the short hood was chopped down so that they can have better visibility for switching. This happened around the same time that the GP7Ls had their noses chopped and had the large windows. Here's an old semaphore. We'll talk about this train set here in a moment. This is the Lake Mishumina, and I believe it is the last fully intact sleeper in Alaska. There were a couple in Tanana, but that's another story. They're no longer intact. This train set right here, there's a few other cars. This was part of the Alaska Centennial. The Alaska Centennial was in 1967. That was in celebration of the 100th anniversary of the purchase of Alaska from Russia. Thank you, William Henry Seward. They have some cute little window coverings to keep the windows from being busted out. Here's with batteries. Not sure if they're original, but they're there. We're going to keep walking down here. Here's a pretty interesting drive belt system, probably to provide power, electricity for the batteries. Obviously it's had roller bearings put in. I don't believe these were the original trucks, just by looking at them. Could be wrong though. These cars right here on this side, just so you know, these were built between 1943 and 1944 by Pullman Standard. These are World War II troop sleepers. These are all sleepers right here, just because you can see the larger paired windows. There's also a couple of diners, or I should say kitchen cars, that are on site as well. Inside there's a little museum inside of a museum of sorts. There's a lot of railroad artifacts, some from the Council City and Soloman River Railroad, a railroad in the Nome area, Copper River Northwestern, I think I saw a couple items from Tanana Valley Railroad. I went through and I grabbed some photos, but since it's dark in there, I'm not able to get the best photos. This car right here, maybe we'll walk down and I'll just back up a little bit. This is a United States Department of the Interior Bureau of Mines Mine Rescue, number 5. There's a little plaque that talks about this car, and I'll take you to it. I don't believe technically this was an Alaska Railroad car. Records don't show it as an Alaska Railroad owned car. And this talks about the car. Yes, it was built in 1917, AC and F, number 5, and it was transferred to Alaska. Mine rescue. This was a an educational car on how to work safely in mines, as in for mining. At one point in time, there was a lot of mining going on in Alaska. Kennecott copper mine, for instance, gold mines, the coal mines of Healy, Suntrana, Vitro. We're looking back the other direction. These are true heavyweights. There's not very many in Alaska left. Back over here to these cars. Outside, these cars look like they're in amazing shape, and we actually can see some of the numbers, the original numbers, and there will be photos that will go with that for documentation, and you'll be able to see them hopefully soon on alaskarails.org. And there's the end of that Bureau Mines car. And I will be doing a short video of the 1018. That's Tilley's caboose, a last intact wooden box car in Alaska. That large round circular spot right there was a large herald. We'll show you that here in a minute. That is the Whitney section house. Alaska Railroad does not run through the Whitney area anymore, since it's now part of J-Bear, Joint Base Elmendorf and Richardson. And this is a speeder, gas-powered speeder, Fremont. There's another really old speeder. And we're just going to walk around and see some more of this antiquated equipment. This was a rail bus. I think it was called an ice worm, if I remember reading it correctly. And it was used in the Portage-Whittier area. Not in the best shape, but it exists. And that's big to me. This is an old Alaska Railroad tank car. And you can see some of the dates on there. Painted 7/2/55. Repacked means for the bearings 1970. There's some other cool lettering on here, and obviously, like I said, there will be pictures. This had waste oil. This carried waste oil. This was not a revenue tank car. I don't believe it ever was. And there is an old ancient flat car. Well, go on that side here in a minute. Here's another view of the rail equipment up there. The Alaska Railroad main line is right over there. In case you're wondering how the equipment got here, it was not trucked. It was brought over by rail, and a Chinese switch was built. Nowadays, I don't believe there'll ever be a Chinese switch put back in again, because that means you would have to mess with the main, and it's now all CWR. Whereas when the trackage here was put in, it was all jointed rail, and it was easier to do that task. And here's a side view of this car, and this was built in November 1916. Sorry for the sun. Some old lettering here. The old trucks. Looking at this flat car, I do wonder its heritage, but we'll save that for another day. Today you can find a few of these types of flat cars around, not in rail service. There's a private bridge in Hatcher Pass that utilizes the body, the flat deck, to go over a creek. This is a little GE 44 tonner. I believe this was used in Valdez when there was a small rail yard in Valdez. That would have been for the pipeline construction. So there were barges that were ferried from Seward and Whittier to Valdez for a pipe plant, and they would join 40-foot sections of pipe into 80. I believe this one runs, for those that may not be familiar with a diesel locomotive with side rods, it's a light locomotive. There's only 2 traction motors, one right there and one right there. And the front axles are not powered, so the drive rods are employed. And here is the Centennial Plaques, and these are the other cars of the Centennial train. Here's something very unique. These two are ex-Copper River and Northwestern box cars. This was a wood bunk car, rebuilt from a refrigerator car. Says this car was built around 1900. Northern Pacific owned it before the Copper River. Then the Copper River Northwestern Railroad used it until it was shut down in 1938. There were some pieces of equipment that made it from Cordova to Alaska Railroad. A locomotive for sure, number 23. I believe a couple of coaches and various pieces of equipment such as this car. This other box car right here is also Copper River and Northwestern. So this is extremely unique to see these cars from a totally different other railroad in Alaska. Not in the best shape, but again, they exist. So here we are going down here, and this is P24 Power Car. Would have been used in freight service for the early piggyback cars, and it looks like just by looking at this was a cut down 40-foot gondola. such as the ones that came from the Rio Grande in the late 1940s. Old two-bay hopper right here. Sorry for the glare. This would have been used for the Healy power plant, so it was only used to go from the Tipple at Centennial up the branch line, pretty much where the unloading facility is, across from the Jiva power plant. And it provided the coal for that power plant. And I'm going to walk over here on this side so the sun is kind of behind me. Very cool pieces of equipment. Here's a brown hoist crane, steam powered crane. There are two here. This is the big hook. This is a 6-axle crane. There's been a little bit of there's been some people wondering if there were ever any 6-axle steam cranes on the Alaska Railroad, so we're gonna walk around here. Another possible gondola cut down into a flat car. This was the tool car that went with the crane. You can look inside there and see all the big gears and cables. This is spreader number 6. It was pneumatic, which means it ran on air. It has been converted to roller bearing, probably in the 1970s. I'm not sure when this was retired officially, but 1970s is about right. We're going to go around this side. Here is a troop kitchen car. What's unique about these is it's painted as it would be used in passenger service. I don't believe these were ever used in actual passenger service. I'm pretty sure these two here are part of the Centennial train. They're slightly different, as in they have the actual Alaska Railroad lettering, United States Department of Transportation, and some of the other numbering on here. So they all have their Allied full cushion trucks. I believe Alaska Railroad may have been the only railroad in the United States that used Allied full cushion after they were banned in 1955. I know that I've seen a few in the early to mid 1990s in use, albeit in work train service. Alright folks, this is a good portion of the rail equipment here at the Museum of Alaska Transportation Industry, just outside of Wasilla, Alaska. If you ever get a chance to, I highly recommend coming out here and taking a look at some of the vintage rail equipment. And there's also a wonderful collection of, over there, old tractors and cars and trucks and everything associated with old-time Alaska. Alright, take care.